So we are here. All right, everybody. So we are on, and I am excited about this talk with Alex. I have some really good friends of mine that are on, and some new friends, hopefully, moving forward. So I'm going to be talking about LGBTQ issues, and I know a lot of people have been asking me to do it. I even have my Pride shirt on. Be true. I got this from New York Pride a couple of years back, so I'm a little proud of it. Everybody's been asking me to have one of these shirts. So we're going to be talking about LGBTQ plus issues tonight, and we're going to also be talking about what's going on. I have some great guests. I wanted to make sure that we heard from the perspective of LGBTQ people, and I wanted to be diverse. And so this is going to be a listening space for me and a learning space for me. And it's also going to be a space of just really kind of just talking about things that we are concerned about. All right. So you guys are going to be with me for an hour. So just to kind of give a little bit of a discussion or kind of a record discussion with it, I want to kind of show you guys a video of what's been going on in Philadelphia. And we're going to kind of start off the conversation with this. Okay. So I'm going to play this video for everybody. All right. All these things.
Has learned a death investigation from earlier this week was a horrific murder. The transgender woman's body was found in the Schuylkill River, badly mutilated. Action News reporter Annie McCormick working the story for us. She's live now at police headquarters with the new information that we're getting today. Annie.
And Shari, we're talking to many members of Philadelphia's transgender community who say that this is really hitting them hard. Now, Philadelphia police say they are still looking for any information as to who is responsible for this brutal murder. 27-year-old Dominique Fells was discovered brutally murdered and dismembered on the banks of the Schuylkill Monday night. Fells, who went by Remy, was Black and transgender.
It's a risk to live in our truth and be who we want to be and live authentically.
Tatiana Woodard, a Black transgender advocate, is fielding calls from people within their community who are in fear after hearing about Fells' murder.
It's a sensitive time in the world right now, period. Me personally, as a Black trans woman, I'm a little upset right now. I'm a little upset that I don't think it's enough attention on when things happen like this.
Philadelphia police made the discovery just before 7 Monday evening near the Bartram Gardens section of Southwest Philadelphia. Fells' body was found face down and suffered stab wounds. Both of her legs were severed. Some close to Fells tell Action News off camera in the days before her murder she was seen fighting with a male acquaintance. Police have not released any details about the investigation, including if they think this was a case of a hate crime. Woodard says she hopes, if anything, more light is shed on how the Black trans community is treated.
She was a person, that she was somebody's sister, that she was somebody's daughter, that she was somebody's friend. She was a person, and it shouldn't matter how she identified. It should matter, the person should matter, and the person should always matter.
And Shari, the city's Office for LGBT Affairs says that on their Facebook page, they will have updates about a community grief session that they will make available for the community. Philadelphia police are looking for any information. If you have that information, contact 215-686-TIPS. Reporting outside of police headquarters, Annie McCormick, Channel 6, Action News. Shari.
Yeah, she is a person. Let's hope police get a break in this case. Annie, thank you.
Food insecurity has grown worse during COVID-19. Now, 1 in 5.
Oh, they're always trying to get us with these commercials. So what I want to do is kind of bring it back, and I want to introduce the panel that I have. I have 3 amazing people with me today. We have Fae Alaz. Pronouns are they, them. Fae Alaz is a studio artist and activist based in Philadelphia as a disabled and non-binary person. Alaz's work often focuses on individuals often marginalized for their varying identities and the ways by which those identities are exploited. Prior to the pandemic and a near fatal hospitalization, Alaz was a master's student in the University of Pennsylvania's Weitzman School of Design MFA program. They are currently living in Pittsburgh for the duration of their medical leave of absence and presumably the rest of the pandemic. I also have Cashlynn Huynh. Cashlynn works at the pronouns she, her. Cashlynn works at the Senior Law Center. She is originally from New Orleans. She studied in Maine and now lives in Philadelphia. She loves coffee, pugs, and proving people wrong. And we also have Gregory Yorgey-Girdy at large. Gregory Yorgey-Girdy is an attorney and fierce advocate for equality, inclusion, and active community engagement. He attended the University of Texas and graduated with a BA in economics. Thereafter, he served as manager for Crime Victims Compensation Unit at Texas Attorney General's Office. He then went on to obtain a JD from Widener University, Delaware Law School, and was admitted to the bar of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In 2018, Gregory completed his MBA with a focus on strategic management from Temple University Fox School of Business. He maintains an active agenda of philanthropic undertakings, which include his role as the co-chair of the Liberty City Lesbian and Gay Democratic Club, co-committee person for the Ward 48 Division 8, treasurer and board member of Philadelphia Family Pride, president of Philadelphia Texas X's Alumni Association, and as an active member of the Philadelphia First Police District Advisory Committee. Whoa, that's a lot. All right, so let's introduce you to my guest. And I'm so proud to have you guys on. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about first this death. How are you guys feeling about Ms. Dominique Fails? And how do you guys kind of relate it to what's going on in our country? And I will let you go first, Faye.
Hi, thanks Alex for so much for having me. Well, as you know, a Black trans woman, it hits particularly hard. The death of Remy, as well as the death of Rhea Milton, personally, are things that kind of put me on this sort of social media hiatus, as it were, for the time being, as Black people, Black and brown folks, and POC watching these events, it can't help but feel as though we're traumatizing ourselves each day. But there is also this need to be informed. And although I did not know Remy, I know people who knew Remy. And I, up until you played the clip, I hadn't read the full description of what had happened upon her body being discovered. And it circles back to this very difficult time where a lot of this, be it George Floyd's death, or be it, Remy Fells or Rhea Milton or Layla Polenko, the person who died at Rikers last June while under custody, awaiting bail. These are narratives that we're all too familiar with as Black and brown people and as trans individuals. I think right now, because of when this is happening, the spotlight has been kind of revised. And although these aren't new, it hits particularly hard when we're in a situation, we're in a media environment where we're seeing Black and brown death, we're seeing violence every single day. And I think the particularity of where this is hitting home is just where we, as Black and brown individuals, we say Black Lives Matter, but we need to ensure that includes all Black lives, Black LGBT individuals most especially. And I hate to use any phrases such as double jeopardy, but these intersecting identities, as you accumulate them, with that you accumulate a series of adversity and difficulty in your life that you don't typically encounter. And all this to say, I think a lot of trans people, especially Black trans people, are really considering and processing their trauma. And it's been helpful to hold space for this in our online communities as individuals. But with that is still a shared pain. Because although it is not unfamiliar, it is coming at a time where not just tensions are high, but there is a degree of uncertainty and fear that existed before COVID, before George Floyd's death, about leaving your house at night or being alone. And my heart's pretty heavy today and has been for the past couple of days, weeks really.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, just death, period, Black death. And then the horrible way these things are happening, finding a body dismembered. It's just what type of person? Or how do you not see somebody as a human to where you can just literally just dismember their body like they're not human? Cash, I just want to kind of hear your perspective on it. I mean, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot constantly being fed very similar content, like the perpetual narrative that our bodies are disposable and people aren't really angry and outraged, and people aren't doing anything to really center, uplift, and also make sure that our names stay in people's mouths. especially in the context of being like a Black and brown trans woman, right? I mean, regardless of the relationship that trans people have with people that inform their decision to murder people, because like I do know there have been stories of trans women who have been victims of crime of passion, right? They've been murdered by their loved ones, their family members, and then like there are stories of like people just being murdered because of straight up hate crime, right? So regardless of our relationship with people, whether it be intimate or public, like there is like still some like some aspect of transphobia that like takes forms in these interpersonal relationships that people don't really notice, right? Like they're very subliminal, they're very subconscious, like right, like they're microaggressions. And I mean, when we think about trans bodies being disposable, right, I'm like also talking about Black and brown bodies abroad, right? Like I don't want to center transphobia and trans misogyny to just the Americas, because it's not because like the rest of the world is not immune to it, right? I mean, like when I think about crime of passion, I think about the story of Jennifer Lottie, a Filipino trans woman who was murdered in the Philippines back in 2013 because of U.S. militarism, right? And when I think about trans murders in the context of America, I'm also thinking about Isla Nettles, who was murdered literally in front of NYPD because she was clocked by a group of men who wanted to pursue her, right? So I mean, like it's very heavy. Like this is like something that we are very familiar to. The constant harassment, the constant dehumanization of our lives, the constant devaluing of our humanity. And I think like when we're focusing on these conversations, we really need to be sensitive about who's really the most impacted by it, and who gets to tell their stories, right? Because like I said, transphobia, trans misogyny is not exclusive to just the US. It is a global it is a global virus. It is a psychological virus that a lot of people really need to consider, that can take form interpersonally and also internally. So I mean, like it's a lot. So yeah, echoing everything that I said.
Yeah. So like my thing is this. I don't like, for me, transgender issues sometimes is a bit of a blind spot, right? Because as a gay Black man, I mean, I feel like the LGBTQ community is sometimes looked at some people as a monolith, right? And although we do share struggles, right? There are some struggles that are particularly more nuanced and more, I guess, pervasive in some of the communities that we have. I mean, like, I feel like, some communities deal with extreme violence more than others, right? Especially the transgender community, because I think a lot of people are confused about sexuality and transgender, and sexuality and gender, right? And those things. And so, like, I mean, I would love one of you to kind of, jump in and kind of explain the difference for the people in the audience that may be paying attention to this and aren't really or don't really understand. Okay, so I kind of want you guys to settle on that for a second, and I'm going to run the first question by Gregory, and how it's really affecting him seeing this happen, because he is over Liberty City as an organization that represents LGBTQ people politically. Okay, so I want to definitely hear about how this is felt against him, but then I also want one of you to kind of give us like a little bit of a rundown for people who may be watching that are just a little bit confused about the sexual preference and then the whole gender discussion and how the two are separated. If that's okay with you guys, do you mind that? Giving us a little bit of a teaching space for that, Faye and Cash?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna get Greg to give me his feelings, and then we're gonna go there. Also, share, comment, please, ask questions in the comment section. We'll bring them to our panel to kind of answer those questions if you have, like it, and so we can make this a really robust discussion. Greg, how has this been making you feel, considering what just happened to this sister of ours?
Well, first of all, it's exhausting, and the thing that I always share with people, it's akin to the Floyd situation. When you saw the knee on his neck, and people say, "Oh, you know what? I feel for y'all." for y'all. My thing is, it's about people. It's about human rights. It's the same way with the situation with trans women, trans Black women. When you have someone murdered, someone is murdered. It doesn't matter what their sexuality is, their gender identity is. It's murder, and it should be treated as such. I attend this parish. It's called St. Miriam's, and it's in Montgomery County. And I don't know if everyone remembers Diamond Williams, who was also murdered and left a body unclaimed. And the pastor at my church decided to actually bury her in the cemetery at my church. And I thought to myself, this is a church I want to be a part of, because this is a church that views everyone as humans, and actually did something that the family didn't even do, which is important. It's disgusting, and everyone should be outraged, not just just the queer community. It should be everyone that's disgusted with this. One of the things that we've done at Liberty City is we put together, with a host of different organizations, a march that includes trans Black women's rights, Black queer rights, Black Lives Matter. I'm not trying to say all lives matter. I'm trying to focus that within the Black Lives movement, there are subsections of people, like Black queers, trans people, that we all need to unite as a community and speak up, because we have value. All of us have value. And I think it's really important. Right now I'm just angry, drinking a lot of wine and brown liquor to get through these things, because I can tell you right now, being the father, a gay father of 2 Black men, I'm angry, and I don't just sit by and just let things happen. I don't know what, maybe one of my kids may identify differently later. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I know one thing: they should be able to enjoy life just like anybody else, and to be able to live their life fully without worrying about being murdered by anyone, whether it be police or some person that is afraid of their own, will have own issues. It's just troubling times right now.
I hear you. So, Faye, Cash, let's have this conversation. Let's have this conversation about sexual orientation. As somebody sent me a message because I was saying it wrong. I had blind spots too, and gender. Let's have that conversation real quick. How do we discuss this? What is the proper terminology for some people who just may not know?
Do you want to take a stab at this, or okay? Well, it sounds like you're going to say something.
Oh, I was actually going to ask you the same question, considering this is where your degree is.
Oh, yeah. So I guess I'm going to give you like a Google response. I'm going to give you a Google response. You can like easily Google this, but yeah, there's like a huge difference between gender and sexuality. A lot of people conflate the two. They use this synonymous to each other, which is actually very, very incorrect and perpetuates very harmful ideas of queerness. So gender is something that you identify with. It's something that you feel in your heart belongs to you and feels like home when people correctly gender you, or when you identify with like X gender, right? And like there can be like a multitude of genders. There could be men, women, people who are bi-gender, people who are agender, people who are pan-gender, right? Like there are like so many different ways to identify. And obviously the LGBTQ plus alphabet soup is like constantly expanding. I feel like there's always like some new identity that people are like talking about that I'm learning more about, right? So like that is gender. It's more of like how do you feel internally, and like how do you want the internal identity to reflect externally, and how do you want that external performance to be treated in private spaces, in public spaces, in professional spaces, right? Whereas for sexuality, it's something that like you're attracted to, and obviously having certain parts don't really determine your sexuality, because you can be a straight guy and want to suck dick. Like that is completely valid. People like don't have the right to gatekeep people's sexual identities. It's really how you self-identify, like how you navigate relationships, attraction, so on and so forth. Like you can be like bisexual, you can be heterosexual, you can be homosexual, You can be like anything. Yeah, but like I said, like discourse around us are constantly evolving, so people are constantly finding new ways to articulate their identity and make it valid.
And so, I'm sorry, did you want to add to that or take away anything, Faye?
That mostly covers it. A few things. I guess if there were like things that maybe in like the general like the audience like would know is that whether it is gender as Cash described it or like sexuality, we tend to have ideas or beliefs around the way these things are codified or what they're supposed to look like. And despite being in the same, as Cash said, alphabet soup kind of coalition of letters standing for different intersecting queer identities, there's often a lot of infighting or, for better yet, hatred that comes or prejudices from some members of the LGBT community towards like others. Particularly, I think where this is most pronounced is biphobia, particularly both from homosexual or just monosexual people who are strictly attracted to the same gender, and from straight people like alike. This idea of bisexuality needing to look or be a certain way, often predicated on fakeness. And then, of course, is transgender individuals. We know that just from the story that we've talked about and our own experiences as trans individuals, the way we navigate life isn't going to be the same as a cis gay man. There are ways that we regard or stereotypes that we have about what a effeminate, what a flaming, what a so-and-so gay man should be. But the fact is that attraction is probably like the least visible component of somebody's attraction. The main divide in which we are often persecuted or exploited comes from the gender component or identification component, because there is a component of expression, some visually codified language that we do when we express, when we decide to dress ourselves in like any particular which way. Being trans doesn't mean you have to look a certain way. It doesn't mean you have to do hormones. It doesn't mean you have to wear makeup or shave, but it does involve inhabiting this comfort within your gender. And there are many ways of expressing that, but we run into this issue where the way that trans women, particularly Black trans women, express their gender are often liabilities that end up criminalizing them or resulting in like them facing immediate harm. Moya Bailey, a scholar who graduated from Emory University, termed a term for this called misogynoir, which particularly refers to the misogyny experienced by Black women in particular within like a Western context. And I think it's very, when we're talking about the specificity, right, we're not just talking about queer people, we're talking about a Black trans woman who was murdered, at least in this particular story, when a Black trans woman isn't being murdered. It's something the American Health Association is calling an epidemic of deaths of Black trans women. And attention needs to be brought to that. Because when we talk about the ways that these are expressed, there is inherently an intersection. You don't get to just be queer. There is some kind of a component of your ethnicity, your identity that perpetuates that. And I feel like the construction of what the stereotype should be, what a gay Black man should be, what a trans drag queen or what somebody is supposed to look like, can end up either A, creating this harmful image of what queerness is supposed to look like, or B, still like result in people who aren't even queer, who just look queer, having their look and the way they look be weaponized like against them. And I think it's important because, you yourself, or rather the video clip, brought up the possibility, or whether you're calling this a hate crime. And it is. There is just a very difficult like precedence that we have with the American judicial system, where that proving that it is hard. Inherently, I would say that any death of a trans woman at the death of somebody that is not trans, the difference is inherently a hate crime. It is a difference between the, delta and like status, the social class, between the mobility one has, the ease at which one has to commit that crime. Specifically, when we talk about the death of diligence, when we talk about, Lillian Polanco, who died at Rikers Island, when we talk about trans death, we talk about Black deaths. They're more than often preventable. And you don't get them to be proven as hate crimes towards people for their sexuality, for their gender, because unless somebody is screaming the expletive and screaming slurs as they're committing the crime, there barely isn't. They'll often say, we don't know if this white 45-year-old man with a Confederate flag belt buckle beat senseless this woman to death in a gas station because she was a Black trans woman. And he gets like with murder, but the hate crime statute doesn't often end up coming into play. I think a famous example of this you can look at is that of Mark Wahlberg, who does have hate crime allegations like on his criminal record because he was screaming it. There is a degree of self-preservation that comes into that kind of hate that we see, where there's like this denial where people will be like, I don't care what somebody's gender or sexuality is. And this is kind of akin to the I don't see color argument. We need to accept that we have differences in one another's like gender and like sexuality that may be a mismatch to what either we're expecting or what the person may have presented them to be. There's a dynamism to it, but what there shouldn't be is a death sentence associated with you having these identities and the way in which you can express them. So even though I want to be happy at the protections for LGBT peoples in like the workplace, it doesn't mean a whole lot if at-will hiring is still like a thing. That bias, we can't prove it legally whether somebody's bias showed in the hiring process unless they said these terrible slurs. So it's all a thing of gesture. And even the thing of like having our rollback protections rolled back for healthcare. I am a disabled individual who is also benefiting from Medicaid. It affects me directly, but the thing about that is that we really didn't have those federal protections to begin with. When they were introduced in the Obama era, they were essentially left in limbo and then finalized. So there is this disconnect between what our legal protections say apply to gender and sexuality, and then there are the experiences of people who are queer in any capacity, what they experience. Sorry not to go off like on that, but there's just so much contact with this story that we're talking about.
It leads me to my next question. I mean, because I find it difficult because in our country, when you want to make things happen, right? When we want to see massive change, we have to find ways to bring different communities who are not a monolith together, right? So say, oh, we want to fight for African-American rights, or we want to fight for Hispanic rights, or we want to fight for LGBTQ. And all of these groups or communities are not a monolith, right? There are different subgroups within these various communities. And so as it is with the LGBTQ plus community, right? And so what do you guys feel, and I'm just going to ask you your personal opinions, is the best way to make these things happen, to see the real change? Do you feel like there's a way to combine our movements or our communities or the subgroups within these communities together? Or do you feel like it's an individual fight? And I kind of will just toss this back at Cash. Like, how do you feel like the most productive way would be for this? And I'm going to just take it Cash, then go to Fae, then go to Greg. All right?
Yeah, definitely allies need to carry the burden of dismantling white supremacy, of dismantling heterosis sexism, dismantling anti-Blackness, dismantling xenophobia, right? Like, this is not the burden that marginal groups have to carry, right? Because we didn't invent these systems. These were already pre-existing systems that existed for centuries that ensured the survivalhood of the dominant group in America being white, middle class, upper class, cisgender, heterosexual people, right? So I think like when we're thinking about activism and how we can invite people to the movement, so like an example that I'm like thinking about is what happened with George Floyd, right? And like how a lot of people were performing their activism online with the square boxes, and like sharing resources, right, for like a week. And after that, like everything kind of like stopped. So that was the moment when everybody on social media understood what was happening structurally and systemically, right? People were engaging in this conversation, but there wasn't shared language and vocabulary to build that longevity so that people can continue their investment and pretty much effectively organize like their private or like public bases, right? So I mean, like people have been like shaming people for like, oh, like you haven't been like a part of this movement like for X amount of time when like Black Lives Matter came into existence, or like the movement that people named as Black Lives Matter didn't come into existence until like 7 years ago, right? So like, where were you 7 years ago? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter when you joined the movement. You're here now, so let's talk about it. Like, especially for me as like a non-Black POC, I'm trying to like organize and mobilize my base of non-Black POC groups to be a part of this conversation, like enhance our worldviews so that we don't leave our anger, our frustration, our engagement in like this brief moment in time, because Black lives have mattered way before the pandemic. Black lives matter during the pandemic and will continue to matter post-pandemic, right? So like, what are we doing to like build a collective liberation movement that has longevity and shared vocabulary and language, so that we know what we're organizing against, right? Because like, there are people who have been a part of these protests who are like, oh, I don't believe in like abolishing the police. Okay, cool. Well, then why are you here? Then like, why are you here, right? Oh, like, I don't believe in looting. Then why are you here? Then why are you here? Like, do you not understand the juxtaposition of protesters fighting against American capitalism, against white property, against white capital? Like, do you not see the juxtaposition of that and people prioritizing all of that over Black lives? Like, do you not see that juxtaposition? Like, do you not see the reason why people are looting? So it's like, yeah, like we need to like be able to build longevity with this movement and having shared vocabulary and language, and also like not really encouraging, but like demanding that allies, non-Black people of color and white people, to act up when it is time to. And that is constantly every day. Like, that's every day, because it's exhausting for Black people to constantly have to legitimize their existence to non-Black people. That is exhausting.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, because I just was a little bit curious. So if we're talking about the LGBTQ community, right? Do we consider the people inside the LGBTQ spectrum allies? So say I mean, me being a Black gay male, right? And I'm saying that I want to support transgender people, right? Am I considered to be an ally? And if we decide that we want to have some sort of if we want to bring us together or advocate for each other, I mean, is there a way for, are we considered allies, or are we a part of the same community? And I might want to kind of toss that at you, Fae.
Thanks, Alex. I think that in order to tackle that, I feel like the participation of allyship really should be to an individual. I think Cash hit like so many of like the points in regards to fostering the allyship and what that can particularly like look like. But I think there needs to be just like an acknowledgement that we can't have, let's say, like Black Lives Matter without every single Black life being involved. And encapsulated that is the sentiment of Black disabled lives, Black trans lives. You know, we've been seeing things like Black disabled lives matter, Black trans lives matter, because like you're saying, Black people aren't a monolith, and the same way by that virtue LGBT people are not. You can't have the LGBTQ like movement, you can't have pride without the, you know, inaction of Black trans individuals that like fueled the, you know, first Stonewall riots in 1969 on June 28th. It's just, when it comes like to that, there needs to be an acknowledgement of the history and where this comes, particularly within our modern social movement. The words that we use to express and like that we've been talking about this evening are not that old. They've been around very recently in modern history, and like within like some within living memory. And the way that we use like the language has changed over time. But we need to make sure, the point I was going to get at is that we're not, with the language, regardless of the language we use, the narrative needs to be the same. We have these differing divides of what Black Lives Matter means. And I think I kind of relate it to a degree, because of the times we're living in, what social distancing means. Because I think after we passed a point of like mid-April, people were beginning to decide to themselves what social distancing means. Social distancing to me means I have this close group of friends that I want to see every now and again. And I have this date, and I have a couple of things I go to, which is, although less social interaction than I normally do, is what I call social distancing. And I think that applies pretty well to Black Lives Matter in terms of trying to engage. You know, I think with Black Lives Matter and with racial injustices, as well with, you know, maintaining vigil like during the pandemic, there needs to be this individual accountability to a collective effort, whether that means addressing these two, you know, global health, very important health issues, be that like, you know, the health of like Black lives, particularly those of like women and those like queer individuals, and like two, the need to assess like the pandemic, which is killing those people disproportionately than any other group of people. And I think it's kind of hard to describe to some people, whether we're talking like pro-protest allies or what have you. It's hard to articulate to some people that you can both be pro-protest and pro, you know, quarantine We need to understand the scope of the amount of Black lives that have already been lost to hundreds of years of this system and will ostensibly continue to be lost to the system, are far more important than the short-term health of, like, albeit very important, of a pandemic. If it 200,000 to 1 million people, like, more, we're looking at all these Confederate statues, we're looking at like monuments of colonizers being taken down, and some of those colonizers, such as Leopold, have body counts of 10 million. What we need to say is that the allyship declaration has to be declared on you, but in order to be accountable to that, you need to be listening to the people you claim to be an ally with. Alex, for example, you are like a gay Black man, but you got to be showing up for trans people. You got to be showing up to disabled and non-binary people. We can't have, I'm just using you as like a hypothetical in this four-person room. Yeah, but we have to like make sure that the same people are saying Black Lives Matter, marching in the street with us, aren't going back to beating the shit out of Black women and Black trans women in gas stations 2 weeks later, because those are still Black lives. We still need to prioritize, make sure disabled Black people. I mean, we have a whole different conundrum. We have an autism problem and a disability problem where Black youth aren't being diagnosed or receiving the amount of care for their disabilities, and that creates institutional problems. So I guess what I mean to say is that Black Lives Matter as like as an organization, as a movement, as a sentiment, encapsulates so much more and is by its own meaning intersectional allyship. So it's the same way, can you call yourself a feminist? Sure, if your definition of feminism doesn't vary like too greatly with ours, I feel like, you know, or the people that you're claiming to be like supporting, which we all know that feminism just isn't about women. It happens to bring attention to women disproportionately facing injustices compared to the rest. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean Black lives are the only ones that matter. All lives matter is built into Black Lives Matter. It just is built into the fact that we need to focus on who is dying, who is suffering disproportionately compared to everybody else. And I think we need to make sure when we have these marches, we have a problem right now when we're identifying allies, we're identifying sides. How do these sides manifest and present themselves at these protests, or even on our, whether it's misinformation, whether it's the twisting of these narratives, needing to keep them separate, people being like, we don't mean abolish the police, we mean taking away enough money to where their roles reduce. Like, no, we mean abolish the police. We really do mean abolish the whole thing. And it's just kind of that sentiment that arrives that there can't be that degree of like confusion. Defunding is but one of a step to the path of abolition, and then that means abolishing what we know as, you know, the police. Because when we look at these like groups and the need to particularize as the kind of reforms that have been proposed prior to 8 Can't Wait, the reforms being introduced by the Democratic Party, they've been implemented on individual police stations and not resulted in, you know, the kind of change that we are probably perhaps expecting to see. And I think when it comes to big movements like this, allyship means not changing your opinion when concessions are offered, when some kind of appeasement is offered, when some kind of halfway between your goal. And ultimately, when it comes to compromise, when it comes to movements and changes, I think it's important to keep the goal in mind, like, as well. And I think that goal can like differ, but it comes to an example of even talking about marches, even talking about pride. Myself and many other like abolitionists or just like queer people in general concerned for our safety, Black and brown individuals, trans individuals, have not wanted cops at Pride for a very long time. And it's what's allowed things like Dyke March to be the premier place to go for performers compared to things. And when we talk about having like a march to go alongside this one, we're talking about having a march for Remy. We got to make sure that I think it makes almost more sense to have those same people have their presence. We can't have an additional splinter group saying, here's the people talking about queer rights and LGBT rights. Like, no, we need to understand and recognize that those are a need to be listened to group of the same cause that we are working towards, which is, you know, dismantling the system that is systemically killing us at a disproportionate rate compared to everybody else. So I think those are, the main takeaways that need to be the same when we're talking about. And if there is like kind of like disagreement like between that, you can, but the participation in these like spaces, you know, it gets to like the point where there's like a little bit of like where you are at the same spaces. And I think what we need to be ready for, whether it's talking about your own allyship or as well as like other non-Black individuals, is that you can come to these protests, you can be doing your best. And it was kind of like the analogy that Cash was using about like it dying down in a week. But more so, you are still able to commit some of these acts of prejudice and acts of like racism, even including Black people, can some of like the worst transphobia I've experienced growing up in like, you know, my own like community came from like other like Black folks. And that kind of goes against like the sentiment of Black Lives Matter. So like I said, it's a matter of like keeping that like consistent and making sure that you are not subsequently compartmentalizing and creating more marginalization with your allyship. And the last thing I want to say in regards to that, because I was talking about you're a Black individual who just happens to not be a trans like woman, and all the like, it's still like so centered around like the importance of like that is identifying the specifics. And again, I sure to say things like double jeopardy. The last thing I'm going to say is I think Cash brought up a very interesting point about the participation of non-Black people of color in these movements, because we need to understand that people of color is not a stand-in for Black and brown, and that unfortunately when we talk about these, sure, anybody who is not white ends up like benefiting to some degree as being subjugated to whiteness or implicated in white supremacy. And where the divide happens, though, is that Black and brown individuals or Latinx individuals don't benefit from the model minority myth that other people like Asian Pacific Islanders or other minority groups like by. That isn't to say that Asian people or like non-Asian people are hurt by the model minority myth. I can't tell you how many, you know, Asian like friends I've had who have been like disregarded or ignored in their tutoring sessions because they were assumed to be smart. But I think it also acknowledges that we don't see a disproportionate amount of Asian people who are being killed in broad daylight, who are being like tackled and arrested for jaywalking. And although we did have those incidents where we need to like focus on where we are politically, or where I guess the US politics are, where we had people beating up or assaulting Asian or East Asian, even just looking people, even if they weren't Chinese. But the narrative has moved past towards that racism about the virus being brought in from China, and then the racist ideology that perpetuates that being them being the enemy isn't one that prevails currently, where now the virus to many conservative Republicans doesn't exist anymore. And being able to be forgotten, you know, and being inactive, like being actively aggressed upon, are different things. And I think it needs, although we do share a lot of experiences, but we can't just claim ourselves to be all one group. The same way that trans people and gay people are not the entire LGBT community, you know, Asian Pacific Islanders, Black people, and Latinx people are all going to have very different ones. And it isn't to say that the current conversations take away from immigration detention centers, I think is a good example I want to see. I think they're still like built into the same kinds of like resistance, because there were Black people participating in these protests calling for the release of like migrants. And this isn't to undermine and say that those individuals' struggles, that people like dying in these immigration detention centers aren't horrific. It is just the conversation that we like find ourselves in, and we need to keep that same momentum so that we can tackle these individual issues that affect non-Black people of color as well, because although they end up having very different implications, they still are coming from the same source, but also sometimes perpetuated by non-Black people. And I feel like there needs to be an observance of what you can do as an ally, even if you are just non-white. Sorry, allyship is just such a big thing to.
It is. It's a big thing to unpack too. So I'm gonna toss it back to you, Gregory, and I will say this: I'm really trying to give the space for, because I feel like sometimes us as males take up a lot of space. So I try to.
I understand. Yeah. First of all, Faye, thank you for what you said, because you hit so many nails on the head with your conversation. And personally, I'd like to actually talk to you privately on so many different issues, because I do feel you. Everything I do, everything I say evolves around my kids. I'm a gay Black man in an interracial relationship. Born in the South, played football, and is a big Black man who is considered an athlete and supposed to do certain things and supposed to not do certain things. I've always was raised with stereotypes, and I always go against stereotypes. One of the things I've learned is that Black skin is a weapon, and it's viewed as a weapon, especially Black men, and it's unfortunate. And when I have my boys, I see that, and it just breaks my heart, and it scares me and keeps me up at night. So I do anything possible to protect them, anything necessary. One of the things I also learned is that with in a interracial relationship, once we had kids, and I love my in-laws, but once they had Black boys, the narrative changed. they had some stake in the game, and now they can visualize Floyd. They can see one of my kids being in there, and it's a whole different mindset. And that just led me to believe that sometimes that hopefully that people can change in the sense that when we educate people and we can view black men in particular as humans, you can see what the problem is. When a man is wrong,
Greg, I think we lost you.
Yeah, I think we
The
lost.
man is what?
that's a problem. I don't care what his background is. I don't care if he's a crack dealer. I don't care if he's a pimp. I don't care what he is. That's murder. It just exhausted. I get angry, and you know, forgive me if I get not emotional, but I just get angry with this. And in the profession I am as an attorney and working in the firm that I am, which is a good firm, but sometimes people don't understand you. When I say things with passion, it's been hostile.
Mm-hmm.
That annoys me, and I'm tired of that. When I go in with a suit, which I do every time I go into the office, you look nice. Of course, I take it as a compliment, but everybody else wears the suit too. Why is that different? Should I come with my do-rag? That is exhausting. And I say this because it's just like with the trans women being murdered. And it's just left aside. It's like some dog that was killed on the side of the road. Let's just move it away and throw it away. That's exhausting to me. It has to change. I don't know how that's going to change. And I want to be a part of that change, no matter what that is. And even as a black male, it's exhausting always to be looked at as something that is a weapon. It's something that is ready to murder you, to ready to kill you. So it's justified if you shoot me. That's exhausting, particularly when I have boys that look like me. I don't know what the solution is, but I want to be a part of that solution. And Faye, you really laid out some things to me that I just really enjoyed. That I've been educated to, and I thank you for that. I thank this whole forum for that, because I think these things are necessary for people. I think what needs to happen is people need to be open to do that. I always tell people when I talk to young kids about adversity, and as black people, we know about adversity. I was raised with adversity, and instead of walking around adversity, go through it. And what I mean by going through it is you learn through adversity. It gives you strength. So when that storm comes, you can withhold that. You can go through it and you know what's going on. This is something new. You know what I mean? I've been blessed to have certain things in my life. I haven't always had them. But if I were to lose them right now, I would be comfortable because I've been there before. That's what adversity is. And I think that's one of the things that we as black folks know and can lean on. I wish that one of the things I want for this march that comes up on Sunday, which happens to be on Father's Day, which I think is important because there are gay black fathers out there, they're gay fathers, they're straight fathers out there who are concerned about their kids, is that we look at people as people. We do not have a police presence out there. We went away from that. We're not going to have it. We work well with the Dyke March to make sure that happens. We want to be out there without that. So when you talked about that, I thought that was important. We're trying to work with the trans community to make sure that we have speakers that speak on that. I wish I've known you before that, because you would have been an excellent speaker for this. My God, a great because it's important. I just want to be unified and to move. And we also will have someone to speak on the demands of the Black Lives Matter. So
let
anyway,
me kind of cut in because
I thank you all. Cash, thank you for your information for that, because I've learned a lot. This is a time in our life that is crazy, and I never would have thought I would be quarantined and seeing so many movements. And we need allies. But anyway, thank you guys.
So let me just toss this in there, okay? Because we have gotten a question in our comment section for you guys. I mean, well, specifically for Gregory, but I want to kind of toss it back at you guys too. I mean, and since we only have about 10 minutes left, I mean, we got to keep it, because what I want to do is give you a space to also tell people how to connect with you, okay? So they can follow your social media and hear more of your voice, all right? So how you guys, I know that in different spaces, it's kind of rough to manage, right? And so I think he asked a very specific question to Greg: is how does he manage the fear with his sons? But then I wanted to also toss it to you, Cash, and hey, like, how do you guys manage on a day-to-day basis, and how do you deal with the fear of being who you are and being able to be out there? Like for me, I mean, I just do my best just to be as loud and as open as I can. I have a huge ass flag in my office. I mean, so the straight people aren't confused about who I am, just in case. I rock my gay flags, my t-shirts and all that kind of stuff, so people just aren't confused. But how do you guys manage the fear of just being you and living out loud? And then after that, I want you guys to kind of toss in there how people can connect with you, how people can ask you questions personally, all right? And so I'm going to toss it to Greg. Just give me like a 2-minute answer to this question, and I'm going to give it to Faye and then Cash, and then we're going to close you guys out by letting people know how they can contact you with some of you guys.
Sounds good.
Okay, so go ahead, Greg. That's the question on the bottom, if you can see it. Greg, can you hear me? Greg?
We don't have your audio coming through, it looks like.
Yeah, your mic's mute, man.
Alex, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, sir. Go ahead. That's the question.
I can't hear you.
Fear with
I
your
know
son.
there's a question about how do I manage the fears of my sons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to cut anybody because I can't really hear anybody else. I don't know if it's my iPad or not. Just to answer that question, you know, it's so funny. I will have a picture of my kids. I have 2 black sons and I have a biracial daughter. When I see that picture, sometimes I get emotional because it scares excuse my language, the shit out of me every effing day to see them grow up in a life that they don't know. My sons, who are nice, caring kids. I don't know how. The only thing I manage it with is just pray and to do everything I can to protect them. I raise them as kings, that what they are. So the only answer is prayer and just to give them the tools that make them to be great citizens, and hope that our allies can help to see them not as weapons, but as the individual and the kings that they are. That's the best answer I can give.
Okay. And then
and also too, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, Alex has my information, and I give them to anybody they can, because I'm willing to talk to anybody. So if I can be of any help, so thank you guys.
Mm-hmm. All right, Faye, you go next.
I'll make it super quick. I mean, what is the black, or like what is the trans experience if not persisting? I think it just comes down to, at least the way I've been managing, has been as like cliche as it sounds, like holding space for like myself and allowing myself to be like supported or receive the support I need from friends, because I feel like when we're often in these spaces, it can feel so unmanageable that it seems impossible to be productive like about it. So I think maybe accepting support like where you can has been incredibly beneficial. And I think it often helps to hear and like make community. I guess like find where your allies are. One thing that I struggled with in particular was being like one of 2 black trans people in my entire MFA program. And, you know, we got along like fine. We were like the best of like friends, but you really need to, especially when we are in settings where the institutions have been built around this bias. They're not our friends and family that we normally would find, our chosen family that we would. So it seems also maybe unhelpful because that is effort, but I think you need to be vigilant about who you can lean on for support more than anything. I think in this nature and like this mindset that a lot of like black and brown folks get into is you get so used to managing in spite of, you know, the lack of help, that you essentially manage to make it like a whole way of living or a way of subsisting. And as somebody who has been hospitalized multiple times and still struggled to return to grad school, that eventually runs out. So I think recognizing where, you know, you can kind of shoulder off the burden of the fight to other people, especially now more than ever, I mentioned to you, Alex, that I was taking a little bit of a social media break. I have been for about 3 days now, and it feels like wrong to be doing it, but I need to understand that this is trauma. This is a part of like that experience. So taking the time to step away from these sources and still be informed, I think has been very invaluable these last couple of days.
Okay. How about you, Cash?
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to really owning my identity, owning my authenticity, owning my truth, I just do it. I just do it, and I constantly have to remind myself. No, yeah, like for all, like I have to constantly remind myself the many sacrifices that my family had to make in order for me to survive today, right? My experience is deeply inherently rooted to violence, war, and persecution. Yeah, like also colonialism, right? Like before colonization in Vietnam, trans people were seen as healers. We were seen as spiritual guides, right? Like people sought help from trans Vietnamese indigenous people as people who could help guide people into the path of enlightenment, right? So like I always ground myself with that part of my history, with that part of indigenous history before different colonial influences significantly shape our landscape, and also how people really choose to identify with colonial history. So for me, constantly reminding myself that my history has always been queer, as a Vietnamese person, as an immigrant person, and me walking out every single day with the intention of teaching nothing but love and compassion, teaching nothing but feeling really comfortable with yourself and closer to self-enlightenment, like however you choose to define that. That is how I feel I am practicing the legacy that my ancestors have fought for. So yeah, just like constantly grounding myself with that history, separate from Chinese colonization, Portuguese colonization, because they were there for like a quick minute, French colonization, so on and so forth. There is history, like there is queer and trans history in Vietnam, and colonization has like erased that part of my identity. And the process of reclamation in public and also in private has been really, really liberating, and just engaging conversations with people about how they can come to their own self-enlightenment is a way that I ensure that I am being true to my roots as a trans Vietnamese person, as a spiritual healer, as somebody who is supposed to provide the guidance for people who can't detach themselves from the material world, right? Because gender is like inherently attached to the physical material world. And a way for us to detach from that is to recognize that at the end of the day, humanity is the only thing that really connects all of us together. And if we can't respect each other's humanity, then there's no community. So yeah, that's like always the complex that I bring out to the world when I enter it.
Okay, so again, how do we get in contact with you, Faye and Cash? Like, what do we need to do? What are you working on? What do you want people to see about you guys?
Well, personally, I am still a little bit on hiatus. I touched on it recently, but I'm still on a medical leave of absence. And because I'm not in Philly right now, I don't have access to my studio. A lot of my studio practice and all my politics are on Instagram, though. That's going to be Fae Ruin, Fae period Ruin. I haven't posted anything in weeks. And before that in a long time. But when I am active, I am active. And a lot of my portrait practice has to do with marginalized communities, particularly Black and Brown and disabled people. And a lot of my installation work has to do with the notion of crip time, or time kept relative to one's disability and intersecting identities. But yeah, that's pretty much the only thing. My website's under construction and has my old name on it, which is but Fae.ruin on Instagram. I'm not taking clients anymore for very obvious reasons, but yeah, not to be underwhelming, I'm just not very online these days.
No worries. And Cash?
Yeah, so y'all can just email me at Cashlynn Huynh, CASHHAHUYNH @gmail.com. Yeah, I don't really like share my social media because like it's like more of like a personal thing for me, and I don't really use my platform the way that Faye does. Which, by the way, her content incredible. She's an incredible photographer. So post pandemic, if she's still in Pennsylvania, y'all please commission her. She's great. She has a
Faye,
vision. She has a
I wish
vision.
you were doing more people, because I definitely would definitely hire you. I can hear now because I got out and came back in. But for anybody who's around on Father's Day, we're doing the march, and I apologize, they're doing fireworks. I'm in South Philly, and we love fireworks apparently, even before 4th of July.
Yeah, actually.
Oh, that's baby girl.
Sorry. Yeah.
She making a carrot.
About kids. You can reach me at in my email, which is open for anybody. It's ggirdy@gmail.com, and also social media. My full name, Gregory Yorgey-Girdy, on Facebook, and on Twitter it's and Instagram it's at Yorgey-Girdy. I guess at that little whatever YORGEYGIRDY. To me, it's important for me to be, for my family, a protector and a provider. I take that seriously. Just as a gay Black man, I think it's important. I believe in community, and I believe in making my community, for my family, real safe and harmonious, and reaching out to all different people. We thrive on diversity, and to be educated by diversity. And I think that if people realize that it's other people out there that look other than them, I think we'll be a better world. So hopefully we can get through this quarantine and whatever else is going on. It seems like it's such negativity going on, that we'll be a better place. But thank you guys for the platform, and thank you, Alex. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
I'm telling you something, you guys. It's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. You guys are awesome. I'll see you at work, Cash.
When the office opens, or if the office opens this year.
When the office opens again, right? And Faye, I mean, please, let's go out and have a drink or something. Or
you know what? If y'all go, y'all take me too, because I want to go.
Or we can just hang out at the park. Like, we don't have to drink.
Yeah. All right.
Let's all four of us go. We'll definitely do it.
I'm all for it. Anytime. Most definitely.
One drink only.
Your treat. You got that lawyer money. All right, y'all. Thank you. I'm going to take you off now. I'm just going to do my closing words, and then thank you. And this will be up on my Facebook page, so you guys are more than welcome to take clips. I know that people will be taking clips and sharing their pieces. You're more than welcome to do whatever you need to do with this stuff. It's going to be up on my page, all right? And I think that I could follow you at some point, Faye. You are on some social media platforms. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having us, like, here to be able to share experiences. And
All right. So, guys, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me with Talks with Alex. You guys have been amazing. I've been doing this for the past month and some change. And I've had some people who have been consistently watching, giving me great positive feedback. We really need to learn how to care about other individuals in this world. I was writing my statement about my feelings about Juneteenth, and just having a discussion about how this country has ideals that they say that they want to live up to. But sometimes those ideas or the dreams of us living to those places of justice are usually deferred by people who wish to maintain the status quo because for some reason or in some way it serves them. It is our responsibility as individuals and as humans to make sure that everybody is able to have justice, that everybody is treated fairly, and they were all able to access the wealth that this country has to offer, regardless of who you are, where you come from, who you are born to, what socioeconomic status you come from. We all deserve to be able to live life, to live it free, to be open, to love who we want to love, and to be happy and live long, happy lives. So, guys, in this fight of Black Lives Matter, recognize that all lives in the Black spectrum matter. Not just Black men, not just Black women, but Black LGBTQ people, Black handicapped people, all Black lives, or whatever situation that you may find yourself in, or however you may identify under the Black spectrum, all these lives matter. And we can't pick and choose with it who we want. Because if you say Black Lives Matter, you should really understand what you're saying. All right? Thank you so much for watching and listening to me. And thank you so much for listening to my friends. I appreciate it. If you have any suggestions of any other topics that I can speak on, or if you want to come and be a part of my show, or if you want to come talk, we can have a conversation about something that you feel matters to you, just reach out to me. You can hit me up at jay8390@gmail.com. If you're wondering where the J comes from, my first name is actually Jason, but I go by Alex. And so, like, just hit me up, let me know what's going on, and we can talk about it. You're always more than welcome to follow me on social media. This streams on my YouTube platform, jay8390@gmail. jay8390 is the place where you can subscribe to it. And thank you so much. I also feel more than happy to reach out to these people that were on the show. They would love to hear from you. Support them. Send them a couple dollars on their cash apps. Hit them up. Let them know what's going on. Let them know that you care about them. Let them know that you appreciate them. That was one thing that we always learned in church. If you like what they preach, go and give them an offering. Tell them to keep on going. All right, I'm all for it. And just hit them up and tell them how you feel and that you've been following, especially the artist. I mean, because this pandemic has hit the artist the most. I mean, because if you are living your life off the gig economy, and I know what it was like when I was a full-time artist back in 2008 and 2009. I mean, when the economy collapsed, I lost everything because there was no funds coming in. So guys, especially the artists, go ahead and support them. Shoot them a couple dollars. They shouldn't even have to ask you. Just say, here, I'm talking to you. I know that you're probably going through it. Here's a couple dollars because I'm doing okay. And you keep it moving. All right? You ain't got to announce it to the world. That's between you and your higher power. That's between you and your conscience, knowing that you did something positive, right? That's something easy and quick that you can do if you don't want to necessarily go out and pass out food. You can shoot somebody a couple of dollars that you know works in the gig economy, or that's an artist, and help them out. All right? Okay, that's my soapbox, and I feel like I'm ranting now and rambling or whatever. But yeah, thank you. It's been my pleasure to have these conversations in front of you. All right.